Throughout the series The Origins of Chaos, we proved how the flame of chaos is the result of the union between light and darkness. In the last episode, we proved this union to be inspired on the medieval alchemic concept of wedding, or union of opposites. In this final episode, we will unravel the union of opposites performed by Izalith 1000 years before the events of Dark Souls, and by doing so, we will solve the greatest mystery in the Soulsborne series, the sacrifice of Withc, the 40 pygmy. In the first part, we will recognize Withc as the specular dark version of Izalith, and therefore her bride in the union of opposites. In the second part, we are going to recognize the mysterious ritual often mentioned in Dark Souls, in the union of opposites between Izalith and Withc. Finally, we are going to recognize in Withc the 40 pygmy, and therefore the origin of all darkness. At first sight, Izalith and Withc immediately appear as two beings of similar appearance, but of opposite nature. The following clues will demonstrate the strict relation between these two characters, and why they are supposed to be such a balanced duo for the alchemic union of opposites. In Izalith's staff description, Izalith and her daughters of chaos are mentioned to be flame witches. Also Withc is mentioned to be a witch, and considering the palette of colors of her miracle and tools, we might recognize her as the Black Witch. In the first episode of this series, we noticed how Izalith Chaos Flame present a double nature of light and dark. Also the items related with Withc and the Black Witches present such a duality. In episode 3, we discussed how the first sin is just another name for the union of opposite performed by Izalith. Being Withc the goddess of sin, it is likely for her to have taken part in the first sin as well. Izalith and Withc are seen respectively as the sinner and the judge. This duality is referenced in the names of the two swords carried by Pontiff Sullivan, which are clearly another manifestation of symmetrical opposites. In episode 4, we discussed how Izalith is a reference to Hestia, the Greek god of flame. One of the iconic characteristics which Hestia shares with Izalith is that of wearing a hood. This, of course, is also among the most prominent features of Withc's design. In episode 7, we discussed how the union of opposites performed by Izalith generated the bonding demons. This same creature is seen in the painted world of Ariamis, an area dedicated to the cult of Withc. As we proved the relation of specular opposites between the two witches, we will now unravel the ritual they have attempted in order to obtain an alchemic wedding. To do this, we will compare the clues regarding Izalith and Withc with the alchemic wedding of our PC with Henry, which we already introduced in episode 8. We saw in episode 8 how the union of opposites starts with the rite of wedlock, where the Japanese term used for rite is gishiki. Already before the release of Dark Souls 1, was revealed how a certain rite was related with the Flame of Chaos, as are related with Chaos the only 3 items which contain this term in their description. The Ring of Sacrifice reflects on its surface what are likely Izalith and her Daughter of Chaos involved in some kind of rite. The Server is a sword which changes description when infused with Chaos. The Rite of Kindling, as we saw in the first episode, is about the union of darkness and flame, and it is, therefore, a manifestation of chaos. The recurrent connection between the rite-related items and the chaos flame suggests such a rite to be the generation of chaos itself. But there is more. Both the rare Ring of Sacrifice and the Server mention a sacrifice in their name. The Server original Japanese name, indeed, is Sacrificial Sword. The Ring of Sacrifice tells us the sacrificial rite is related to Withc, while the Sacrificial Sword is a ramdao, a ceremonial sword used to cut in one strike the head of a sacrifice. The name and the description of the Ring of Sacrifice imply how Izalith and her daughters sacrificed Velka during the rite, while the inspiration for the sacrificial sword suggests how the sacrifice was executed by decapitation. The use of a sword to hit the head of a sacrificial victim is something which the rite of Izalith has in common with the rite of wedlock, with the difference that while the sword of Avowal has the power to extract darkness from a sacrificial victim, the so-called sacrificial sword has the power to extract HPs. The only other swords in the Dark Souls sequels able to absorb HP are the Lost Sinner's Sword and the Eleonora, which are both weapons owned by those who had generated chaos. Let's compare this with the Sword of Avowal. Even though at first look HP and darkness appear to be unrelated, we have to notice how humanities and Estus are the main source of HP in the game, and considering that burning humanities in a bonfire allow to gain more Estus from it, it is logical to assume the Estus to be burning darkness. If darkness and HP can be considered as interchangeable, we can then assume that as the Sword of Avowal allowed to extract darkness from the head of Henry, the sacrificial sword which can be used to extract HP allowed to extract darkness from the head of Velka. To complete the ritual during the usurpation of fire, our PC, who already carries the darkness in his body, also absorbed the power of flame, and through the union with Henry becomes the Moon Presence. Similarly, Izalith, who's already the owner of the power of flame, absorbed the power of darkness, and through the union with Velka becomes the Bed of Chaos. While the Moon Presence appeared to be the result of a proper union of opposites, it is mentioned how the Bed of Chaos was the result of Izalith losing the control over the process. And observing its design, we can still distinguish the burning body of Izalith from the wooden one of Velka, each with its head and two pairs of arms. These, somehow, remind us the union of the fruit of life and knowledge in Neon Genesis Evangelion, which we described in episode 2. The reason for Izalith's failure might be related to the fact that while the PC and Henry are always of opposite sexes, Izalith and Velka are both female, and it is not possible to consider them opposites in this sense. We saw in episode 8 how to achieve the alchemic great work, one must first obtain the soul of the world. This mythical element must then be handled through a specific process, which allows three different transformations, known as Nigredo, Albedo, and Rubedo. The first stage of transformation is Nigredo, which in Latin means black. It refers to a process of putrefaction, during which the soul of the world assumes the black color. In the first part of episode 8, we recognize the demon soul of the Old One as the soul of the world, and in episode 7, we recognize the dark soul as a derivative of the demon soul. This might signify that when the furtive pygmy found the soul of the world in form of demon soul, he transformed it in darkness through the process of Nigredo. There are several elements which connect the process of Nigredo with Velka as well. The main symbols referring to Nigredo are the crow and the decapitation. While the crow is the most prominent symbol of Velka, our previous analysis of Izalith's ritual earned Velka also the ownership over the decapitation iconicity. Another reference to the process of Nigredo is the Dark Ember, which, as most of the items related with Velka, is located in the painting of Ariamis. This ember allowed to convert holy weapons into occult, which refers to the darkening or blackening meaning of Nigredo. Considering their common dark origin and their connection with the process of Nigredo, we can confirm the theory that the YouTuber Ashen Hollow claimed long time ago about Velka being the furtive pygmy. The next process of transformation, Albedo, means white and represents the stage in which the blackened world soul gets purified in preparation of the union of opposites. As the rare ring of sacrifice and the sacrificial sword, in Dark Souls 3, the description of the pyromancy purification fire refers to the sacrificial rite of Velka, and it has been probably used to purify her dark soul before the extraction. Finally, rubedo, which means readiness, represents the successful union of opposites. As already discussed, we can observe this stage in the Bed of Chaos and the Moon Presence, with different levels of success. Both these creatures are indeed characterized by the color red. In an interview regarding Dark Souls 3, Miyazaki said that an overarching theme started with Dark Souls 1 and it ended with Dark Souls 3, and that with this ending, he intended to give a message about what the whole game was about. The overarching theme of the game can be explained with the motto of alchemists Solve et coagula, which in Latin means divide and join. The first game introduced an unformed grey world where the dark and light were one. This balance was broken by a form of chaos produced by the death of a god, which event is known as the First Flame and was the origin of disparity. Throughout the series, many have sought to unite the opposite, to transform in the original god, but failed and were devoured by chaos, an unstable union of opposites. Others, afraid of such a power, tried to disperse the opposite before they could collect in the body of a worthy candidate. This caused the iteration of a cycle of union and divisions, till when, in the last chapter, two humans join in the union of opposites to become one god. The great work, the alchemic wedding, the union of opposites, the philosopher's stone, the enlightenment, the magnus opus, the holy grail, the Ubermensch, are all myths which represent the desire for what is absolute, and therefore a delusion. At the end, Miyazaki made of us many alchemists. Binoculars and Aten descriptions are the substances we play with, and our theories are our great works. This was the last episode of my series, The Origins of Chaos. It was 1 year ago when I was banned from almost any Soulsborne group on Reddit, and under suggestion of my wife, I had started working on this series on YouTube. I am happy that at least in this way, I managed to share my work with the rest of the community. I don't know if I will find the time for a second season to write and animate, though the content is already in my head. Thank you for watching my series, and if one day it might gain the success I believe it deserves, I will be happy to come back to work on the mysteries of these interesting games. This series is part of the greater project which started with my book, The Soulsborne Thesis. You can read it or support it by clicking the link below. As always, I want to thank the Soulsborne wikis and all the people who uploaded the images I used for the realization of my videos. I also want to thank all my extended family who supported me even without being able to understand what could be so important in a bunch of video games. Most of all, I wanted to thank my wife, who at this point I believe is just sick of me talking of Miyazaki and his games, and without whom would not have been possible to publish this series. I will see you in the next video.
ありがとう。